right. All right. So if we were in class, our book doesn't have a whole lot about cookies. So I usually have our class watch a DVD on cookies. So that's where this is from, with a couple of questions that I added to it. So first of all, number one says, baking is like a chemical experiment. The recipe is the formula and the ingredients are the chemicals. All the ingredients are mixed, shaped, and baked, gives the recipe its unique flavor, texture, and appearance. And that is true. Whatever ingredients you're putting together, it's kind of like being in a science class. It is an experiment. And you'll find that out next week when you do pancakes, because we'll be starting quick breads. I call it the pancake experiment lab because you add the ingredients one at a time to see what those ingredients do to the recipe. And we'll learn about some of those qualities as we talk through this sheet today. So the 6 main ingredients needed for cookies, and those of you that have made them before know what they are already. And those of you that haven't could probably guess. Flour, sugar, whether that's white or brown or both, like in our chocolate chip cookies, it's both. Fats, eggs, flavorings, and leavening agents. So as we talk about these, they'll become more familiar. So 2 qualities of sugar. So each ingredient, what you'll learn next week, has different functions. Sugar is, as we know, for flavor, makes things taste good. But it also is for browning. So that's what's going to brown up your cookies, is the sugar content. It's the same when you heat something up in the microwave. If it's got a high sugar content and a high fat content, it heats up quicker because the molecules adhere to that heat. So that's why it's important to watch your cookies, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the recipes. Leavening agents. Leavening means to rise. So things that you're going to put into your recipe to make it rise. Baking soda, baking powder. They cannot be interchanged. So if the Mrs. Fields chocolate chip cookies calls for baking soda, you must use baking soda. You can't go, oh, we don't have any of that, so I'm going to use baking powder. It won't work. It won't rise. You'll have flat, crisp cookies. Baking soda needs a chemical, an acid to react, and baking powder needs a liquid to react. So most of the time, you'll have baking soda in cookie recipes, but sometimes you'll have baking powder and sometimes you'll have both. 2 different fats that are used in cookies, and you could have guessed what these are, because we just kind of talked about fats with my plate, the good and the bad fats. Butter, oil, shortening, margarine. Shortening is what is found, Crisco is a brand name it comes in a can. It looks like whipped cream, but it sure doesn't taste like it. It's terrible because it's a vegetable fat. And then we know what oils and margarine. If you use margarine in a cookie recipe, your dough is going to be stickier because there's a higher water content. I usually like to make cookies with butter if I can. The Snickerdoodle cookie has both butter and shortening, and that happens sometimes. You have calls for both. 6 says, what's the purpose of an egg? An egg is a binder in a cookie recipe. As we learn, eggs have many properties. They could also, for instance, the egg whites, if you've ever had what's called lemon meringue pie, the meringue on the top is egg whites, so it's a leavener. It's a binder. It adds flavor, texture. We'll learn all about that. 7, examples of flavorings. In a chocolate chip cookie recipe, it's vanilla and chocolate chips. And flavoring makes sense, gives it flavor. There's lots of different flavorings, or what are also known as extracts. So vanilla extract, almond extract, there's peppermint, there's lemon, there's orange. Usually come in a little bottle. And then sometimes nuts are considered flavorings along with chocolate chips. So different things that you would add to the cookie to give them some more added flavor and texture sometimes. 8 we should be familiar with because this was on our first term sheet. The process of softening fat with sugars. That's creaming. That's usually your first step in making your cookies. You're going to cream your butter or whatever fat you're using with your sugar. To bake great cookies, make sure the oven has been preheated and the racks are placed in the middle of the oven. And I'm going to come back and ask you, why do you think we need to put the racks in the middle of the oven? Does anybody know why you would want to put your rack in the middle of the oven versus putting it at the bottom of your oven or putting it at the top? Why is it better to put your rack in the middle or the center of your oven? Does anybody have any ideas what that reasoning might be? Bottom too hot. Olivia says, is the bottom too hot? You're on the right track. What you want is the heat to circulate around your pan. If you put both pans in at once, let's say you put your chocolate chip cookies in the bottom and then you put it in the next rack above it, there's no room for the the heat to circulate around your pan. So what I usually do is I will start one pan in my, not at the bottom, like second or third from the bottom, depends on how many slots you have in your oven. But anyways, in about halfway through, 5-6 minutes, I'll raise it up and then I'll put my second pan in because I know that those ones that I raise up are close to being done. So then it's okay, but you wouldn't want to put both pans in at the same time. And if you have the time, it is better to do one in the middle of the oven. In our class, if we were there, obviously we only have time to do 2 pans because you have about roughly 45 minutes. So I usually tell students to do it kind of halfway and then move it up and put your next pan in. 10, why is it important to pay attention so the recipe's directions about how far apart to place the cookies on a baking sheet so they don't spread together? Yes, I've seen 2 because some people were ahead of the game and were making cookies yesterday and last night. And I noticed 2 of them had put all the cookies on one sheet and it looked like a big pan of bars, which was fine. I'm sure they tasted fine, but I think they didn't realize that you should probably go about 3 across and 4 down, usually about a dozen, unless you have a bigger cookie sheet. Then sometimes you can go 15. But they are going to spread, and if you don't spread them apart, you are going to get one big cookie. And the one pan, like I said, looked like it was just a big chocolate chip bar, which probably was fine. But if you really wanted to make it cookies, you'd want to do 3 across and 4 down. Which brings us to the next one. What's the most popular bar cookie would be your brownies. And how are they different? Bar cookies are in a pan versus us putting our cookies on the cookie sheet. Another cookie type is a refrigerator cookie, very similar to the cookies that you could buy already made in the grocery store. Like when you go to the refrigerator department at the grocery store, you can get those like Toll House cookies. The dough is already made and it looks like it's kind of in a tube, and you can just spoon it out, or sometimes the sugar cookies, you slice them off. That's what a refrigerator cookie is. And what makes that nice is you can make your cookie dough, like chocolate chip cookies. You can eat it when you want to. It's convenient. If you make it into a log, like at the grocery store, you can freeze it, and when you're ready, you can just slice them off and bake cookies. Another type of cookie, the peanut butter cookie, and the snickerdoodles that you have an opportunity to make if you decide to do that recipe, are what's known as a molded cookie, which means molding means to shape in your hand, so you'd roll them into a ball. In a peanut butter cookie, you usually roll them into a ball and then press them down with a fork or a glass. In the snickerdoodles, you don't have to press them down. You roll them in a ball and then you roll them into cinnamon and sugar. And we'll talk more about those recipes shortly here. Why should crisp cookies not be stored with soft cookies? Because your crisp cookies will become soft. And maybe you want that because some people do like a soft cookie, but if you want to keep your crisp cookies soft, or crisp, excuse me, don't put them with the soft cookies because those cookies then will become soft. And then I added at the bottom the different cookie types because it really didn't, it gave you a couple here, but I wanted you to know that there are 6 different cookie types. Molded we talked about, that's where you're going to roll them in your hand. A drop cookie is what the chocolate chip cookies are. There's oatmeal would be a drop cookie. There are some sugar cookies that are drop cookies, which means that you either use a cookie scoop, or what I do is take my spoon. I usually take 2 spoons, one to scoop the cookie dough and the other one to push it off onto the cookie sheet. Bar cookie makes sense. Brownies, there's peanut butter bars, there's Rice Krispie bars, Special K bars. Those are all in the cookie category under bars. Rolled cookie, probably the 2 most familiar are a sugar cookie or a gingerbread cookie, where you roll out the dough and then you take the cutters and, make hearts or stars, or if you celebrate the holidays, maybe you make Christmas trees, or you do the gingerbread man. Refrigerator, we talked about that one, taking your dough and putting it into like a kind of a tube. I have an oatmeal one that I do that with, that I roll up in wax paper, and then when it's in the refrigerator after, it takes them like 6 hours to get it really stiff, then I can just slice it off and bake them on my cookie sheet. And then there's a press cookie, and some of you may have a cookie press at home. A popular cookie that at the holidays is called a spritz cookie. A press cookie is a very stiff dough, usually a higher amount of butter in it, and it needs to be stiff because it's coming through a tube that at the bottom of the tube has discs. Again, if we were in my classroom, I'd show you what that looked like. But it has discs that you can put in the bottom that you can make different cookie designs. You could make it look like a flower, a star, a bell, a Christmas tree. So they have different discs that you can put in. The ones that I have are the old-fashioned where you crank them. There's some that have a crank that you just push the lever and go across your cookie sheet, and they just drop onto the cookie sheet. That's a pressed cookie. I'm going to come back, and I know I went through that fast. Any questions on cookies before I go to the recipes?